Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in-house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. In today's episode, I bring you not one, but two guests as I speak to Rob Ferrone and Adam Blomerley of Quick Release. Having started out as contractors, Rob joined forces with his co-founder Adam Grant to launch Quick Release in 2003. In Rob's own words, they were two Excel types who saw a gap in the market and wanted to create a fun company of like-minded data geeks. It was shortly after this that Adam Blomerley joined and brought with him his famous 5-year plan, something that we discuss in today's show. This saw the start of the transformation of Quick Release, moving them from a provider of quality automotive change management resource into a fully-fledged product data management consultancy. Over the following 2 decades, Rob and Adam set about scaling the firm to help achieve their goal of world domination, growing from a team of just 4 into a global consultancy of over 200 people. Rob and Adam were fantastic guests and share some hugely candid insights into their journey and what it takes to grow a successful consulting firm. In this conversation, we go into detail on a whole host of topics, including the early days of QR and how they were able to go from day rate contractors to building and scaling a successful consulting firm, the lessons that they've learned over the last 2 decades building Quick Release, and the key steps that helped them grow to where they are today. And Rob and Adam's detailed advice for anyone looking to build a successful career in consulting. I really enjoyed this conversation with Adam and Rob. One of the key values of Quick Release, as I found out in this interview, is quite refreshing. It's that they dare to be different, bringing a new approach and a fresh perspective. And Rob and Adam certainly delivered that in this conversation. So, with all of that said, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Rob Ferrone and Adam Blomerley. Rob, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Nick, thank you very much. Hi.
So I'm really looking forward to this, especially Rob, after you've just told me you've been practicing today with some other interviews and some other press pieces. So I'm very excited. I'm expecting big things. Why don't we kick off for those who maybe don't know yourselves, don't know the QR story, with just your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Adam, do you want to go first?
No, I think founder's privilege.
Okay.
You have the floor.
This privilege must be running out soon. I thought we stopped with that when we made you CEO. My background then. My father is Italian. He came over to the UK when he was 16, met my mum.
It's not therapy, Rob.
Yeah. And well, there's a punchline at the end of it, you see. So it's like closing the loop. And I came onto the scene. We were born in Bournemouth, studied up in Warwick mechanical engineering, and kind of already knew then that I wasn't going to be an engineer, although I had a technical mind. And moved down to London, started working with Ford Motor Company in the material handling department, and then did a short stint at the Millennium Dome, amongst other things, around about 2000. And then went over to Genk in Belgium for a project there where the kind of idea was born around quick release. And in about 2006, moved to Cologne in Germany for the first big project, I'd say. And since 2006, I've been living in Germany. And just the other day, I got my German nationalization as well. So that was the closing the loop bit, but fulfilling the migrant the family.
Congratulations!
Story. Thank you.
Adam, do you want to give us a brief run through?
So
where were you born?
Born in Bury. I like to say Lancashire, even though they moved the boundaries in 1974, just before I was born, and it became Greater Manchester, but still Lancashire to me. I grew up in the northwest. I think career is an interesting word in many respects, because normal sort of understanding of the word career implies a certain level of sort of forethought and planning and working towards something. And I would say, especially in my 20s, a career is something that happened to me rather than something I put a great deal of thought and energy and effort into trying to figure out. So anything that you do in the moment, my career is checkered, I would say. I've been a teacher. I've been a profit manager designate. I've worked in corporate events. I DJ'd in a bar and various other things. And all of those and 3 trips to university eventually sort of led a path to Rob's door in 2007. And that's where my story and my career really began, I would say.
You've given me a tough quandary there, Adam, because I really want to dive into that, because I think it's particularly in our sort of industry where the career path for consultants is quite well defined. I think there's a really interesting part there. I guess why don't we start there? We'll come back to the origin story. And actually, you obviously went through various things in your 20s. That career happened to you. What was it about QR and meeting Rob and Adam, the co-founder? What was it that turned that from a chance happening into a career that you've obviously stayed in and climbed in and grown to where you are now?
I think the thing that worked between the three of us is that although I did have this sort of patchwork career in my 20s, it's not to say that I wasn't learning things along the way. And although it took me until I was in my 30s and 40s to realize exactly what it is that I was doing in my 20s and actually doing quite well, it doesn't mean I wasn't doing them. And so if I look back, I'd say there's sort of 3 things that I did particularly well in my 20s. The first thing is that I grew a network and I made some really, really good friends, and made friends in the right way by being interested in other people rather than being interesting. And that's often one of the mistakes that people make. And so I had a very strong network of friends around me. I often, without really thinking about it, said yes to the more difficult opportunities that were in front of me, and learning to say yes to difficult opportunities is a real sort of life lesson that people can learn. And then the third thing I was doing without really realizing it is I was often putting myself in the learning zone, and so I was learning lots of very diverse skills, from how to teach people how to manage accounts and do business development, bits of business insight that were instinctive rather than taught. And actually then all those three things, I would say, when I got together with Adam and Rob, suddenly had a platform and an environment in which to sort of thrive and grow. And I can only thank Rob and Adam for providing that for me. But that's the ingredients that I would say that came together at that moment in time. But if you'd have asked me that question in 2007, you'd have got a very different answer.
Well, I will come back to those because those are some. I know we were talking about sound bites before we started recording, and there's some great bits in there, and really powerful things as well. Because I think a lot of what you've talked about there will come on to your advice for the team you have now and for junior consultants. But there's some massively powerful things in there. And actually, I deliberately only research up to a point with these interviews because I kind of like finding things out on the fly. This might be your point around network, Adam, but it occurs to me just from your sort of your brief bios that Rob, you were in Cologne in 2006.
Yeah.
Adam, you were in Lancashire, Manchester. You'll let you decide where it was at that time. How did you guys meet? How did this chance meeting come so that Adam, you could put all of this together, as you said, and you built the firm from where you did?
We were probably 4 steps removed, Rob, maybe, or 3.
Yeah.
So from my end, I was really good friends with Adam Grant. He and I used to live together in Nottingham. We were both at the same university, Nottingham University, but at different times. He's a couple of years older than me. And when I finished my undergrad, it was in genetics, so nothing to do with what we do today. I hadn't, unsurprisingly, got a plan. Other than I decided that I didn't want to live at home with mum and dad, so I went back to Nottingham and started looking for room shares in the small ads in the local paper, and then took a room out in a house with the 4 randoms. One of those randoms turned out to be Adam Grant, and we lived together for quite a number of years, very, very happily in Nottingham, became great friends. And then Rob's side of the story sort of comes from the other direction. Maybe I'll let you paint that picture.
I mean, it's interesting. It's in many ways it's a lot like being married, so we kind of know each other's stories. And my wife will tell you that I probably know more about these guys than I do about her. So when I was working in material handling in Essex, I became very good friends with a guy called Steve Grant, and Steve's a brilliant guy. Talented, but also very open-minded. And so we hit it off straight away. And we would always take off on weekends and do like short European trips or just do crazy stuff together, just enjoying life. And when I went over to Belgium and I was getting ready to move on from the customer that I was working with, they didn't want to lose me. And they said, do you know anyone that can backfill you? And so I messaged around friends. And Steve contacted me and said, my brother Adam, who I think was at Rolls-Royce at the time, was looking to, change. And so that was the kind of fateful moment where, Adam came over and luckily it fitted in the sense that he was very, very good at what we do. And he was a lovely guy. And we actually started kind of leapfrogging through different customers. And then, sort of soon enough, I started to get to meet Adam's friends, like Adam Blomerley, and that all of them had, big legends, probably none as big as, the legends that go with Adam Blomerley. But yeah, and that's the connection.
And I think that brings us nicely, actually, because advance warning, we're going to jump around a bit here, chaps, but I think I get the feeling you'll be all right with that, is actually all the way back to that, that origin piece, because I think one of the things when we were chatting before the show, you mentioned in one of your emails around that you and Adam Grant were just 2 blokes doing some good work that led to a business. And I want to pick into that, but the first thing that sort of prompts me is actually how you decided to start a business. Because I've spoken to a number of people for the show and just in my network and personal experience as well. I had a previous business fail with a business partner, and actually I think that's a massive decision to go into business with someone. Was it ever a decision, or was it more of it just grew organically from this leapfrogging that you spoke about?
Yeah, I mean, a bit like Adam says. So I never really had because people ask me regularly, what was your vision behind the company? Where did this idea come from to create a company or a business. And it was never there. I did this role and I really enjoyed it, and I saw that there's massive value in doing it. And when Adam came on board and I kind of trained him up and handed over.
Is this Adam G or Adam B?
This is Adam Grant, yeah. And so Adam Grant and I, we just got chatting and saying, look, this is what we're doing seems to be really popular, and everyone's really happy with it, and it seems to be new. Not many people seem to be doing it, and this would be a great idea for a group of people. And it was the idea, I think, was more of a collective of slightly geeky people who enjoy doing that type of work, but who are also up for having fun and just enjoying life. And it was a means to an end, really. And that was the founding idea, and it worked quite well. And it was actually the kind of difficulty and challenges came along when we actually then decided to try and formalize it and do things like create the legal entity and you start employing people.
I actually think you sell yourself slightly short there, Rob. I think the spark of genius that you did have is to recognise the value. The business bit, with hindsight, is the easy bit, because you have to sort of put yourself in the mindset of the time where, as UK nationals, the tax environment for people who were single trader limited companies before IR35 got too onerous, before all the tax regimes around dividends changed. So there was a population of people who were limited companies working all around Europe in all different industries. So I think, without realizing it, that's the space that you were in. So the step to then create a company, a limited company for two people rather than individuals limited company, and give it a name, is relatively easy in that environment. But the spark of genius is to see that what you're doing has value and is different enough from what everyone else was doing to try and make something of.
This probably highlights the differences between us in the sense that Adam thinks that creating a business and running a business is straightforward.
Well, you were going to have to do it anyway, otherwise you're going to pay more tax. Your accountant would have said, make a business.
Yeah, and that's actually something we'll probably come on to talking about later on, but that was one of the easy routes in. I've met so many people recently who have had to seek investment, and they start in the red, and it takes them many years to get into the black. But because we had revenue streams, it made that life a lot easier in that sense. So that was, at least that wasn't stressful.
I think and I can sort of sense the different personalities. So I think there's a whole load of things we can cover, just because I'm channeling inner listeners and just people I speak to. And sort of, Adam, I get what you're saying around the sort of how with hindsight it's easy. And I think the interesting thing is I speak to a lot of people in our space who are very risk averse, or just running a business isn't their thing. They're great at what they do, but the idea of having to run payroll and HR and finance and all of that, just sort of, that's far too much. And I'm interested almost, because it sounds like, Rob, for you there was, and I know you mentioned this in sort of our emails, of it was a huge jump to step one. There was a jump to formalize it with Adam Grant. Then there was actually, right, we're going to start hiring people. And actually, what was it that got you to the point of being comfortable to do that? Was there any conversations you had? Was there any questions that led you to be saying, yeah, we can make that move?
Well, this is a good point to probably start talking about the dynamics between the three of us and why it took a third person, and luckily that was Adam and his personality, to actually then create the momentum. Because when Adam Grant and I, we're quite different people, and where I was a bit more outgoing and saw opportunities and had quite, probably had this optimism bias too much. Adam Grant was very, thoughtful and cautious and risk averse, and, was considered. And I think, in many ways that worked really well together. And so, but actually you could quite quickly get into a deadlock where, for example, if you're talking about, new employees, Adam is saying, well, look, there's a lot of risks associated with this, and it's going to make life more complicated. And I'm saying, well, let's just do it. And so in the end, I think I wore Adam Grant down, and he said, okay, let's just do it. And I said, well, look, we'll do it, and then we'll put things in place to mitigate the risks that you're concerned about. And so we fortunately made that step. But I think if the business had just been run by Adam Grant and myself, we would have always had these kind of not polar opposites, but we would have had this dynamic. And it actually took someone like Adam Blomerley to come along, who has a little bit of us, so Adam kind of, understands the big picture and sees the risks. He's also quite positive and daring, but he has this energy and vision around him that then created this dynamic, which then spun the three of us into growth and forward drive.
It's a really interesting point, and Adam, I guess interested to get your side of that story as well. I mean, and help me, chaps, because I sort of have a rough timeline, but where was Adam Blomerley? Where were you in the sort of the journey in terms of how big was QR, and also what was that conversation? You mentioned live with Adam Grant.
My employee number was number 4, so there was one other person before me who was an employee. And initially for the first 12 months, so I was 30 at the time. I just finished, I went back to university to do a 1-year master's in IT, focused on Java programming. And I had this sort of half an idea that I would go into the world of programming and possibly would have been still there if I'd not met Rob. And yeah, so I came in as number 4, or the second employee, but actually it was for the first 12 months I was sort of a subcontractor effectively, and that was because I didn't have any automotive industry experience, so those guys very sensibly wanted to see whether I could do the job. And also it was a big step for me working in Germany and living in the UK, so I actually just subcontract for the first 12 months, and over that 12 months loved the industry, but even more loved the business. And at that point we decided to make it a more long-lasting and binding relationship, and I started to buy into the equity side of the business and ceased to be a subcontractor. But yeah, it was about there was one other person in the door before me, and I was 31.
Yeah. This is it probably is a good place to highlight the typical conversations that go on between us, where Adam Blom after this time said, I'm really keen to grow this company with you, and I think there's something potential there, but I want a part of it. And Adam Grant and I looked at each other and said, right, well, crikey, how does that work? And Blom said, well, luckily I've got a plan here. I've got this mechanism for doing it, and I've worked it all out. And Adam Grant and I said, well, that kind of seems to be okay. and yeah, we love working with him, and we want him to be part of this. And this guy seems like he's going to take the company forward. So yeah, let's just go along with what he says. And I think that that's kind of been the modus operandi for the rest of the growth of the company, I think.
And on the exit as well.
Yeah.
On the deal. So
yeah.
So we'll come back to the deal, and I do want to dig into actually what was in the plan, because for those who don't know you, obviously you grew the business from 4 of you to, well, you're just over 200 now.
Yeah, 211 fee earners, then executive, and then a back office team is probably another sort of 10 to 12, and then we've got a small number of subcontractors, sort of 10 or 11 subcontractors.
And so that's where I think the 5-year, your framework, your business framework is going to be, I really want to dig into, because I think there's a lot in there for people who want to scale their own businesses, because there's a lot of consulting firms who don't ever get to that size, be it through choice or just be it through that's where their business has taken them. But Adam, I'm interested in almost, and this might be another area in terms of sort of life lessons of, it sounds like you had this thought, obviously, before you took it to Rob and Adam, that, look, I want to be a part of Quick Release. And I really like, and this is what I want to dig into in terms of, you obviously put this plan together. It wasn't a case you went and were just like, I've been here for 6 months, I want a bit of equity. You obviously, put some thought into this. I'd love to find out a bit more around that thought process of almost, when did you decide that, and how did you approach that to get you to that plan, to get you to that conversation?
So this is what I was sort of saying, in the bits of things that I learnt in my 20s, but without really realizing what they were. So I did, through various different opportunities, sort of develop some business idea and some business acumen. And I haven't really got a better word to describe it than that. But it's not as if I was MBA trained or come through a sort of a Big Four consulting background, but I was interested in business, and so I had some of the knowledge, or very little of the knowledge, but some, and probably more confidence in that knowledge than would probably be warranted. So armed with a little bit of confidence and a little bit of knowledge, there were certain things that just seemed quite clear to me that what we needed. So if we needed a plan, we needed to say in 5 years' time where we were going to be, so that we could say to the people we were talking to, whether they were clients or prospective employees, okay, this is where we are today, but don't worry about that. You're not going to be working for a bunch of contractor cowboys. We're a business, we've got a plan, and this is where we're going to be in 5 years. So it was able to sort of buy us that breathing space in the very early years to convince people to come and work for us by saying this is where we're going to be. And I do remember the first 5-year plan that we put together. It's pretty simplistic. We just basically said we want 50% revenue growth year on year. But it was in early 2009 that we sort of put pen to paper on this. So right after the crash. So it seemed quite daunting at the time. And I remember thinking, God, if we make this, it's going to be so good. But almost kind of like, this is beyond the sort of the edge of expectation, but just by saying it and putting it out there and thinking, yeah, let's go for it, it sort of gave you something to shoot for. And so that, I mean, we call it a plan, and it was a plan, but it was 3 lines on one Word document and a little graph. And that same graph that I then put in every annual report we had for the next sort of 5 or 6 years. And yeah.
And was that was the plan that you took? So, because I'm just trying to sort of place it, that was the plan that you took to Rob and Adam and said, I think we can deliver this. Give me a route to equity, and I will deliver this. Or I don't think
it would have been.
Or was it not
quite
as
so formal as that? It was. Yeah, I want to be involved, but I want some equity, and around the same time, as well as talking about whether to order pens or not, we also spent some time putting this plan together. But most importantly, it was sort of looking at each other and saying, right, are we up for this? Let's do it, and sort of looking each other in the eye. Or maybe me and Rob looking each other in the eye, and Boris, or Adam Grant looking nervously at his watch.
I mean, yeah, and Adam Grant did warn me. He said, look, I know Blom, I've lived with him for many, many years, and this could be either the best thing we've ever done or the most risky thing that we've ever entered. But luckily it was the former.
And just on that point, Robin, was there much of a conversation around that? Because I guess for any business, there's you've done a certain amount of work to get it to where it is. Was there a conversation about, do we bring Adam in or not? And just interested around, what some of those questions you may have asked yourself were, and what made you decide, yeah, we're both comfortable with this, let's go for it.
No, I think it was a very quick decision in the sense that, Adam's a very charismatic leadership type, and he has this, infectious ambition and vision, and we knew that was going to be the thing that was going to take the company forward. So we all had our part to play, and I was always the person that had a lot of customer contact and was building the network, and Adam Grant was really in the details and the execution and was all about quality. It just fitted, and we just knew that we were going to be together. And also Adam is a really open guy and very modest, and he never comes forward and says, this is how it is. He's saying that I've been thinking about it, and I think it could be like this. And, what do you guys think? I'm open, he's not at all pushy. So it was, I guess in the same way that I saw the value of what we were doing back, at the very start of the company. We just saw this value in Adam, and we knew that if we were going to have a future, it was going to be with Adam, and therefore it was a no-brainer really to, sign him up and get that commitment from him. And it was quite, I thought it was quite nice actually that Adam, or it was impressive that Adam had thought about it like that. He didn't just say, give me a big salary, or, I want to do it in this way. The fact that he wanted to be part of it made us think that, okay, this guy's serious and he's committed, and he's dedicating some of his salary to it, and the fact that he was buying into it, and that not just financially, but he wanted to make it into something bigger and better, and that just came across. And so
So you'd set out this plan to hit 50% growth, and you've come on board. There's the three of you now, and as sort of the founder directors. I'm fascinated though, and it might be this fast forwards us a bit, but those sort of early few years when you were aiming for that 50% growth. I mean, what were some of those key, if not aspects from the plan, things you did? Because again, this is something that I think when people talk about either growing a business or looking to do that, in consulting, those are quite bold numbers, 50% year on year. And actually, what was it either in terms of the structure, in terms of the offering, in terms of the model that allowed you or that you had to focus on to really achieve those?
So this is where my sort of pre-recording comments start to be relevant, is that we didn't really have an offering, or not one that we'd ever thought about to articulate particularly, and certainly not one that we thought about in the context of the wider industry. There was just some work and some competence that we had, and that was simply our offering. And really kind of like the sort of the inflection points, that the two kind of very early inflection points would be deciding to recruit graduates, and that was like then opened up this whole kind of market of potential great people to us. And the other was like, okay, we've got 2 clients and we need more, and Rob doing the do and figuring out how to sell to a large blue chip company like Ford, and get us on the books with our own supplier code and that kind of stuff, were the 2 sort of early inflection points from my point of view. And the need for those was driven by the fact that we had this plan and we had to get more work and get more people to deliver that work. But it wasn't any more, there was no more depth to it than that, I don't think, which the depth came later. It was just very much this very simplistic plan, and that drove 2 very simplistic needs.
You got 4 of you. You need more people, you need more business. Why graduates? Because I know a number of firms, and I've had guests on this podcast, who deliberately go the other way and say, actually, we're going to hire senior hires, less management, they can go and deliver work on their own. You almost, it sounds like, went the opposite way of grads. Why did you go that route, and almost what were those benefits and challenges it caused?
Yeah, so the decision to go for grads, in my recollection, was quite an easy one, because the work that we did involved managing data and managing information, as opposed to big data or data analytics or anything like that. But there's a core element of handling data in it that lends itself to younger people and smart sort of STEM graduates. And also there's the sort of the industry, the automotive industry that we were operating in, at the sort of price point that we were operating in at the time. The experienced hires tended to be jobbing contractors who had the sort of the systems and the knowledge that we required on paper, but we knew a lot of them, and we knew the type, and they were really not the sorts of people that we wanted in our business. So actually, the decision to go for experienced consultants or young graduates was pretty clear for us from very early on, and not a difficult one to make at all. What's actually harder is that now that we've got bigger and we can't just entirely rely on graduate intakes, is how do we learn that bit that we never did at the start, which is to bring experienced people into the business and create the right experience for them.
And then to go full circle, and that sort of bit leads on to how did that model evolve, and where did you decide that need for the experienced hires? I think before we spoke, you sort of said it was more organic, it was an awakening, it wasn't a sort of a conscious step by step plan. But how did that model evolve from, like you say, initial we'll take graduates because they're better than contractors for us, through to more of a deliberate model and where you are now?
When did it change? I mean, it started to change over time when we started to try and put specific people into specific roles for specific needs that the business had, rather than just a generic blank sheet of paper, bring in a talented person and then let them find their own route through. So yeah, over time, as we've started to feel that need, then that's driven us to try and figure out other ways to try and fill that need. For example, when we've had good years in the past and we've won lots of new accounts and lots of new projects, you suddenly find that you don't have enough of that middle layer in order to manage those accounts or to manage those projects. And maybe if it was a different group of people running the business and it wasn't their first rodeo, they may have been able to see that coming. We were working from instinct and from our own experiences and the things that we saw in front of us, and so maybe had to go through that process first in order to learn the fact that we needed to have a different way to grow that middle layer, rather than just pulling people up through the business. So it's scenarios like that that have always sort of made us take a step back and think, actually, there's something missing in the business, and there's lots of other similar scenarios. I remember, for example, we did one of these surveys where we wanted to understand what our clients thought of us, what our employees thought of us, and this sort of thing. So we had a third party do a survey, and a lot of that survey came back with some really strong positives, but some clear fault lines around a great experience of people at the start of their careers, not necessarily the right company for somebody who's looking at the middle part of their career, for example. And other bits of feedback, or feedback from the client saying, really smart people, really know what they're doing, great work ethic, deliver great value, could do with some grey haired people in to steer the projects and manage stakeholders, that kind of thing. And so at that point, we had a shape of the business that had evolved from the fact that we'd grown. And so we had people coming in at the bottom doing consultancy projects, paid work. The best ones of those we promoted to be team leaders, and they managed other people doing projects. And then we got a bit bigger and we were like, okay, we now need people to sell more work. Rob couldn't sell it all himself. So we took the best of our team leaders and made them responsible for selling more work. Then we got a bit bigger and we need some people to own chunks of the business, to be strategically responsible for chunks of the business. And we took our best salespeople, who were the best team leaders, who were the best consultants, and said, right, okay, you own this part of the business. And that was great for 10% of the company who were the right shape to be a great consultant, a great manager of people, a great seller of business, and a great owner of a strategic part of the business. For everybody else, it was a glass ceiling. At some level, you had some great people managers who just weren't interested in selling work and managing accounts, great people for managing accounts who weren't interested in strategy. So again, that was another example of where we received some input, some feedback, or some experience around what was happening in the business, and then went away and thought about how we changed to overcome that.
And there's a really interesting piece within that of almost, and the point you made around none of you had come from this background. It wasn't that you'd been at, I don't know, Accenture, PwC, and other consulting firms are available, but you hadn't got a playbook. You were doing this off, like you say, it was your first rodeo. How did you discern what were really things that you needed to look at seriously? So, like you said, this point around, glass ceilings versus things that maybe were just growing pains and didn't need changing.
We were quite lucky back then, and again, this is through Adam and Adam's contact network, that they were friends with a guy called Ian Quest, who had successfully grown a consultancy company. And he was just interested in what we're doing, that kind of curiosity. And he would often volunteer his services as a mentor, not even officially, just saying, if you're having this kind of management retreat for the weekend, can I come along? Or we even invited him along and said, maybe you can help us. And then on those instances, then those kind of growing pains, that's when you'd get someone like Ian saying, well, when we did that, this is how we approached it. Or, a great example is when we were deliberating around, who to recruit, and there was a choice, do we recruit that person or that person? And Ian said, well, when, I remember this exact same discussion, 4 years ago, and our advisor back then, our mentor, said, hire them both. Why wouldn't you, if they're that good? And it's advice like that is just really valuable, because it helps you to get through the decisions that are growing pains and the ones that are straightforward when you've got some advice from someone, versus the ones where you have to be a bit more strategic and think about it more and make it unique for you.
I'm trying to decide between going to the sales piece or the growth piece. I want to touch on the sales piece just because The thing that I'm curious on, and a lot of the story sounds like it's grown organically, but I get the sense that at some point there was a formalization of some of the things you do to help you scale. And I want to come on to that side. But I'm interested, Rob, about cracking places like you mentioned, Adam mentioned Ford. Getting into big organizations like that is exceptionally difficult. And actually, that can be the starting point for consulting firms. So I was speaking to someone yesterday who's about 9 months into their journey, having launched their own consulting firm. And they were saying that's their number one issue, is that just getting on PSLs of big banks is almost impossible. Take this either as, how did you crack it, or how do you advise, others you might mentor now? How can people be, what were those skills, what were those things you did that people can be using to do that?
Well, I'll talk about two situations. One was the origins, if you like, and some of it was good fortune, but you make your own luck. And so, when I was working in material handling, I talked to everyone and put myself forward for most things. And a good example is they had a charity event, and they needed to recreate the Thunderbirds film environment on the site. And so I put myself forward into this committee. It was a charity committee, and I then went off and worked with a couple of people to actually go to the hangar where they were storing some of the props, and we brought a truckload of that stuff back and built this up and bought things from the warehouse, oil drums, and stickered them up or stenciled them, and we put a lot of free time into creating this environment just because it was fun and and it was just an interesting thing to do. Anyway, it turns out later then that 5 years down the line, when we were in Cologne, the key stakeholder for then working in that department within Ford was the guy that led that project, and so we knew each other from that. And we were both a bit surprised to realize that he was on the customer side of what we did, and that guy that he knew back then that was kind of running around spray painting stuff was now running this company that did the thing that they were looking for in his department. So, and then it's reputation and relationships, really. Being open to it and just making sure that you knew everyone and that you were talking to people and that you're being curious. And so that was luck, but also doing a few key things. And now our challenge is how we replicate that then with new big blue chip OEM companies. And we haven't necessarily always got that time to have the slow burn within those companies. And
so the charity events, I guess, either.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's definitely a challenge. But it's always going to what we're finding is that it's about relationships again. It's that network in the industry and finding the people that or have heard of you that are now working in those OEMs, and getting being in touch with all of them and getting that lucky break to get someone to give you a chance. And then kind of building on the learnings of how things grew last time and doubling down on that really in those new customers.
There's a bit of hindsight in this, but I would say getting into new blue chip clients, there's probably 4 ways that I would say were the main ways. I think way number 1 is the right way to do it, I'd say, and it's the making the right use of your thought leadership and your referral skills to sort of build your network in the right way and move towards the right senior people, so that you make the relations at the senior enough level, and they can make their procurement departments do what they want to do. And so I think that's probably the right way to do it and the normal way to do it for consultancy. But it can be very challenging, especially if you're like we were, fighting to find our edge in that sense. The other way is like the guerrilla way, which is to go completely the opposite, and it's just to go into the bottom, and any way you can get some exposure to that client on the ground. And that it requires a real sort of opportunistic mindset, and one of the things that I mentioned earlier on is that ability to say yes to difficult opportunities. I remember, for example, Jaguar Land Rover in the early days of Quick Release was a real prize that we wanted to win as an account. We'd tried and failed to go in through the front door with purchase and procurement, and we didn't have the right contacts at the top. And one day, out of the blue, an opportunity to go and do some work through another third party came up, but we didn't have any of the right people in the right place. We didn't have any of the right skills at the time, but we said yes. And I remember working on a project for Ford during the day, going on the internet to learn how to use Siemens Teamcenter product, never used it before, then driving up to the Midlands, working through the night as the only one in the office on this project that we'd said that we'd do, sleeping in my car, going back down to Ford, and then rinsing and repeating that for a couple of weeks. And you look back and think, oh, why did I do that? Why would you ever do that? Why would you take such a risk? But it's the way to do it. It's finding a way. And then once you've got a bit of knowledge about a potential client, you've got a bit of a network going there, then you can build on that and start to work on that. So that's what I would sort of say the guerrilla way in is to find a way in at the bottom, and then just over time those seeds start to grow and you start to reach up through the organization.
To echo that, when I first got that job in Belgium as the resident engineer for the supplier, there's a line item on the job application which says, "Can are you a capable user of this system?" And I asked around and I said to anyone that I was working with at the time, "Do you know what this system is?" And they said, "Yeah, I think it's this and it does that." And I said, "Oh, I'll tick that box then. Yeah, I can use that system." And that was the kind of blag that got me in there. And I did quite well. I managed to go 2 months into the job without having to use this system until one day when they I was shouted at and told I had to create this change in that system within 10 minutes, and then that was my crash course in learning how to use that system. But yeah. So I echo. We've done these things. Whether or not that's the right way to do it, I don't know. But it seems to have worked. Adam, back to you.
Yeah, and they're like the early seeds of the guerrilla. But I mean, that's an extreme example. But there's definitely the getting the boots on the ground in the organisation, doing coalface type activities, and then over time using that coalface knowledge that you've got in an organisation that you've targeted to then start to move up through the levels. The other way, I would say, the fourth way is pick somebody that you know and work over time to build a relationship with them such that they really want what you do. Probably somebody in a middle management kind of position, until such point as they will go into bat for you against procurement and do the bashing down doors. So that's probably the knocking on the front door and knocking on the back door are the side inroads, the going up through the cellar or coming in through the loft, and the four routes into a blue chip.
We sound like a team of burglars.
Well, and there's an interesting piece in that, because I completely get where you're coming from about that sort of relationship side and the that concerted sort of BD effort piece. And again, you never worked in the sort of traditional consultancy, so you just may never have had this ingrained in you. But there are a lot of people in our industry they don't like the BD side, or it doesn't come naturally to them. And you mentioned around your model where you had to learn about, some people weren't just naturally gifted at it, or just naturally it wasn't a skill for them, they needed to learn it. And almost, what advice do you give to your junior team now who say, oh, actually, yeah, I see what you two do, you make it look really easy, and probably listening back to you now, that sounds really easy. What advice do you have for those sort of be it the graduates, or be it sort of more senior members of your team, to start to do exactly what you've said and go in through one of those 4 ways, preferably without a rope and a bag of swag?
Can we answer this in 2 parts? So I'll give the kind of historical version, and you give the new world view. And
can one of you explain where that transition came as well?
Well, I think mainly it's because we in the past we used to have organic growth just because people knew us, and we would have people. We didn't really do business development not active business development in the first 10 years, I think, because most people heard about us. They knew we were good. They knew that we fixed problems and we made people happy. And so you'd get people phoning us up, and every now and then you get a phone call out of the blue, and they'd say, "Oh, hi, we met here. look, we've got a challenge. Could you come and help us? And that was largely how the company grew to start with. And then we at a point Adam realised at the right time that we're going to need to put some business development machinery in place. But the advice that I give to people, is that all you're doing really is connecting people that have a need to a group of people, which is us, that can help them. So it's not, you're not having to force things onto people. And my business development in the early years was really just about making friends with people, giving people things without expecting things in return. Whether it's advice about the systems or creating a macro here or there, or just being in. Adam really made a great point earlier on about being interested in other people and taking the time to understand them and what they do, and just making life fun for everyone. And when that happens, people like being around you. They want the best for you, and therefore they're looking out for you. And then you have opportunities come to you because of that. And my business development strategy in the early years was going to get coffee in the cafeteria, and you bump into people and they great, I'm happy I saw you, because we've got this thing, could you have a look at it for us? And in German there's a phrase called bunter Hund, and it means like a colourful dog, and it means that you're kind of recognised by many people, and it's it's being that, and just being open to encounters and connections to people. And it's still happening today that people that we knew as a friend, and had a night out with or something 20 years ago, that person then gives you a call and says, you do this thing, don't you? Could you help us on this project? That was my version of business development back then. And then Adam's he had one of his visions.
My vision, I guess it comes back to what I was saying earlier on. I think it partly it's luck, but partly it's the people that you're talking to that influence you. And at the time where it was becoming clear to us that we needed more horsepower around business development, the two things that kind of influenced me. One was that in my 20s I was a failed salesperson, but in many things, that just because they don't work out at the time doesn't mean you don't learn from it. And I was selling for an electrical wholesaler, Edmonton Electrical, and I went into it thinking that this is something that I thought I would be good at, and I thought I'm reasonably confident. I can make relationships with people. I can understand the product technically. So that sounds like I should be good at it, but I wasn't. I was terrible. And then eventually got fired. But I always sort of felt that I didn't feel like it was something that was wrong with me. It's almost like I didn't have the right toolkit in some way, but wasn't really able to properly articulate that. At the time where we were looking at like how do we do BD, I was introduced to a guy called Lars Tevez, who ran a sales consultancy, and he said to me something that kind of stuck with me, which is like, most people think sales is a black art or a gift of the gab, and actually in his view it's not. It's something that is a science and a process, and something that, and this is probably the most important bit, something that can be taught to very technical people, and those technical people can become very good at it. They might not want to, but they can become very, very good at it. And that sort of resonated with me in my kind of earlier experiences. And so we partnered with them and started to build a consultant-led sales model that is still 95% of our sales today is on that model. It's only relatively recently that we've started experimenting with dedicated sales professionals from outside of the business. Yeah, and over time, that process of how you teach technical people the science of sales has evolved, and we've got better at it, and we've tried different things, but the core principle is still very much there, and is a key part of our sales model.
And if what you were mentioning there is the piece Rob was talking about, stop me. And also, if this is the secret sauce you can't share, stop me. But what are those pieces that you trained your consulting team in that let them be successful in selling?
Yeah, so I mean, there's various different things, and you talk to the team, and some of them will be more engaged than others. But as a principle, we say things like business development is everybody's responsibility. And if you look at the sales continuum, is one of the pieces that we use in our sales training. The very left hand side of the sales continuum, you've got hope. But as we all know, hope is not a strategy. So that is, we don't start there. The next along on the sales continuum is listen, is use your ears. And so we say that the minimum that everybody can do in the company is listen to what's going on around them. These people are in the client every day, often in sort of sensitive sort of areas of the client that, as a salesperson, you're never going to get access to that level of information. And so we developed a system that we call Hear and Report Back. And that basically says, use your ears whilst you're on project. If you hear something that sounds like it could be an opportunity for us to have a conversation with somebody, log it in the Hear and Report Back system. That gets passed to one of the more senior members of the accounts team, and we go and have a conversation. After listen is ask. So the people who are feeling a bit more brave, we encourage them to ask for coffee, ask for lunch, ask for a game of tennis, whatever it is. And then the really sort of advanced people, the people who are motivated into it, then it becomes, how do you influence clients and all that good stuff. But yeah, so that's one. So by making it everybody's responsibility, then that's one element of the secret sauce, if you like. Then we have part of the model that we've evolved to now is we have, and it comes back to that point I was making earlier on about the glass ceilings. So when we realised we had this unintended glass ceilings, we basically decided what are the 5 things that we need in our business in order for it to grow, and we called those pillars, and they are basically they're just areas of competence that we need within the business, particularly from our consultants and the commercial side of our business, in order for it to grow and function. And one of those pillars is the accounts pillar. And now we actively kind of seek and look for those consultants who are commercially minded and ask them to be involved in the accounts pillar. They're still on project, but a portion of their time is focused around opportunities and identifying opportunities and growing your network. And then the ones that succeed in that get some low-level account management responsibilities. We split all of accounts into field of plays. So within a large blue chip automotive client, for example, a field of play might be the body team. And so we may give a more junior account manager responsibility for that field of play. And then they can start to sort of develop the account management skills and eventually take on their own account. But it all starts as they have to bill for their time, they have to achieve their recovery rate, but they have a portion of their time dedicated to account management and sales.
I think there's 2 big things that have come out from both the, I guess what you call the old way and the new way. And I think the structure of that new way, I think, is a really interesting piece. And that continuum alone and the account approach, I think it often, like you were saying, and you're not the first people to mention Lars, so there might be a guest slot for him if you're listening, Lars.
He's a great guy. I think he's he left SBR at the end of last summer, so he's looking for his final swan song. So it might be a good time to talk to him.
But actually putting that structure around it, and also I guess little things like you were saying with that sort of hear, listen, and report back is, I think, being those eyes and ears can be such a big piece, and actually something that a lot of firms maybe don't put enough stock into is actually what are your team just hearing by the water cooler, by the coffee machine. And I guess, Rob, your point, and I know Adam touched on it right at the start about be interested in other people. I guess that goes throughout all of the structures you've got as well. And I'm going to write it down, the German for colourful dog, because I'm going to stick with that. I might even start using it myself. What was the German for colourful dog?
Bunter Hund.
Bunter Hund.
Yeah.
And is that a phrasing?
Bunter is colourful and Hund is dog. Bunter Hund.
Is that now a phrase used across QR, or is that just a?
I used it in the training. One of the things we do is The directors are still very much involved in training. We have this thing called boot camp, which is 4 weeks of residential training when people come on board. And so you have members of the board in there delivering training just to keep us close to them and them close to us, and to convey some of the experience. But I added it in a slide. I think it was my wife actually that, because I ended up marrying a lady from the customer, and whenever she mentioned my name, they said, "Oh, Rob, yeah, we know him." And then someone eventually said, "Oh yeah, he's a bunter hund."
Was it on your German citizenship test?
I'm sure that counted towards it. I'm sure there must have been someone in there doing administration who must have heard of me from someone else.
Well, and it's one of those points, I guess, that it's, people say kindness costs nothing, and actually, I think it's so easy when you're on particularly say in a consulting project where you've got deadlines to hit, you're really sort of under pressure to deliver, to almost forget those little things. And actually, like you've both highlighted, simply being interested in other people. One of my early guests mentioned she sort of framed it as, it's amazing how interesting people get when you become interested in them. But I think is a hugely powerful piece, and like you've both said, is something, I guess, it doesn't matter what level you are, be it graduate through to director level. Actually, just being a bunter hunt is going to stand you in good stead, and then obviously putting those structures around it sort of lets you amplify that.
Yeah,
I think that brings us quite nicely on to actually the scaling piece, because I think something that when Adam, you were talking about the structures around sales, the question for me, and we'll dig into sort of other areas, is you scaled the business to like you said 200, and I think 211 fee earners, you said, which is actually a very, in our industry, I think I mentioned either at the start of the interview or just beforehand, there aren't a lot of businesses that get to that size. They're usually bought, and I know we'll come on to your sort of the recent acquisition, but they usually sell out a lot earlier than that, or just never get there. And I'm really interested in, almost, we talked about sales, and you've obviously put a lot of thought into that. What were those other 5 pillars, and what were some of those structures that you put in place to help accelerate that growth and let you build to that size?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5 pillars was our way of capturing all of the thoughts and the needs that we knew we had as a business in order to sort of open up the next chapter of growth. But it really, the idea to sort of structure it around the 5 pillars came from the glass ceilings conversations, and we knew that there was like 5 areas of competence that we needed to get right across the sort of the majority of our business, and we wanted to give people early on in their careers sort of line of sight of those things that we needed, so that they could start to make their own decisions and start planning their own careers and start shaping their own development in a way that was going to lead to a place that they wanted to be. And so we coined the phrase that it was 5 pillars and therefore 5 directions of travel. And anyone, wherever they are in the business, whether they were about to join with us on day one, been with us for a couple of years, or indeed been with us for sort of 5 or 10 years, the door would always be open to them for 5 directions of travel, either onwards and upwards in an area that they are currently in, or a sideways move into an area that they were interested in. And so there's 5 areas where the how we sell more work, i.e. the accounts and business development side of things, the what our offering to market is, and how are we going to build the thought leadership that we need in order to find our edge in the market and really start to command a premium for what we do, and sort of move up that value chain. And also start to that area of the service offerings pillar is about like having a roadmap for the work that you do. So if you're doing a project for a client, you don't come to it and get the brief, deliver the project, write a case study, and move on. You're always thinking, right, where is this project on the roadmap of things that we want to develop in this area, and so what piece of IP can we get out of this project, and how we're going to iterate that into the next project. So all that sort of area of the business, we wrapped up into a service offerings pillar through some of the insight that Ian Quest had brought into the business, and through some insight that one of our other superstars, who was homegrown, a guy called Nick Solly. There was a couple of areas of specific competence that we had. One was the special projects team, who are our internal software development team. So they're developing tools, smart tools for our consultants to use on the job, and help sort of build the edge for those consultants.
So they're just to be clear, they're proprietary tools for you as opposed to tools you're developing for clients. Is that right?
It started out that way. More and more these days, the quest for an edge has taken us to a point where we are developing software as a service type tools, where we license it to clients and provide the support network that goes around it in order to deliver an outcome. And yeah, so that was one competency. Another competency was focused around how we do consulting that has got more of an operational performance improvement characteristic to it, i.e. how do we deliver pound notes, measurable value improvements to our clients' businesses that's directly attributable to the work that we do. And in complex engineering, that's easier to say and harder to do. So we had a group that were dedicated to figuring out that puzzle. So we wrap those together into a technical pillar, because the skills that those different competency groups required were very specific for those competency groups, and something that took a lot of development in order to get there. We also still had a real strong need for people who can manage other people and look after each other pastorally, and look after people's development, and have those really good quality development conversations. And that we wrapped into the org pillar, organization pillar. And then the fifth pillar was we were weak at project delivery, and so we wanted to reinforce that side of our business, and really start to bring in some decent project management methodology, and build some real competency around project management, both for our clients and for ourselves. So those were the sort of the five big needs, if you like, that we wanted to develop competency in, but we wanted them to be open to everybody in the business. So there's this idea that, okay, these are the pillars, and everybody can shoot for one of the pillars or more of the pillars at any given time, if that's where they want to go.
I think that there's something to be said as well about the core values of the company right from the very start, especially when I think this is another thing that Adam brought. So whereas Adam Grant being the one focused on risk and saying, right, okay, if we're going to do this, what's the process for doing it, and how do we mitigate the risk? And I think Adam Blomerley, his background is one of his backgrounds is teaching, and this idea of imparting information and knowledge and experience to someone, and then letting them try it, and the experimentation. And Adam did that a lot in the beginning, where we had people where there's an opportunity or a project that needed to be managed, and Adam was very, very readily gave them the chance to own that and learn through experience of running it or delivering it, or acquiring it, or whatever it was. And Nick Solly's a great example of that, where Nick had these talents, and we let Nick get on and do what he did best, and without trying to put too much framework around it, and trusting people, and that really worked for us, and that stayed with us through Quick Release. So we're Adam said we haven't got MBAs, we've not come from the big consultancies, so we're all been learning by doing, and that humility around, there's nothing to say that we're going to be better at doing it than you are, so here's our advice, here's a few pointers, but we trust you, go and make it happen. And that's kind of underpinned, I think, where a lot of the growth, the fact that we didn't need to supervise everything, which allowed things then to grow by itself.
I'm going to pick on the culture piece. I want to come back to the five pillars, but how did you maintain that as you grew? Because it's an obvious one, but an interesting one is, as businesses grow, that culture changes. You went from 4 of you to 40 to to the 200 and upwards. How did you maintain that culture, not just across yourselves as the founder directors, but across the whole business, so that essence of what helped you to grow to where you are has been retained?
I think culture is something that nobody ever gets totally right, and I think we are no different. We have for a long time been very conscious of our culture and conscious of trying to put the right kind of reinforcing and primary embedding mechanisms in place. So, for example, I've always quite liked transparency. So, from the early days of the company, we've sort of opened the books to the employees and showed them this is where all the money goes, and this is how much we've made, and this is where we spent it all, and this is how much we've paid ourselves, and this is how much we've paid you, and all that stuff. And I think that
sorry, Adam, I don't want to interrupt you too much. That feels like a really interesting piece. I mean, how transparent are we talking? Is it to the point where you said this is what we've taken home this year?
Yeah. So we used to publish all that, and now our pay scale is transparent. So there's different job sizes for all the different roles in the business, and everyone on the same job size gets paid the same amount, and that's all published. So it's sort of it's been something that's worked for us, and I think that's one example of trying to sort of promote a culture. Another example could be the idea that we grew up as a business, as a group of friends, and have tried to keep that going as much as we can, and really sort of emphasize the idea of looking out for each other and supporting each other and thinking of each other as human beings and caring for each other. So I think we have had those things that we've deliberately pursued and deliberately tried to put in place policies and mechanisms to keep them. I think there's probably elements of the culture that has had to evolve. There was a time where we were probably quite laddish, when in a male-dominated industry, as a relatively small company of people in their 20s and 30s, going out was part of that culture. But that's one thing that, as we've grown and become more diverse, that we've sort of looked at and said, do you know what, I think we need to lose that now, and we need to try and change things.
Can you remember what the trigger was, Blom, for that? We sat around, I remember it was at Alex's house, we sat around together and tried to put some, describe culture. I can't remember what it was, but there was a point in time where we actually thought, okay, we need to, I think it's probably from your brother, Ben Blomerley. So Ben Blom has been one of these people that is also really, and I'd say this is one of the top tips. I know you're going to ask later on, but this is one of the top tips: is surround yourselves by great people, but and there'll be people that have got really good advice and seek their advice and their counsel. And Ben Blomley's a very insightful, smart guy. He has got a consultancy background, and he kind of knows more than we do probably about running businesses, and we've got the practical experience, but he regularly raises topics that are relevant and solution, like OKRs, for example. He introduced that to Quick Release. But yeah, he mentioned culture and said, right, well, let's write this down. So we sat down together and we said, well, what is it that what is it we're doing? What are our values? And how could you boil that down to some simple ones that we can then have as our reference? And Quick Release is quite a playful company, and we talked. When we started coming up with ideas, it became apparent that it was going to be a play on the QR Quick Release, and so we came up with these 4 values at that time, and they seemed to encompass. We checked all of the stuff we were doing and said, actually, do you know what, these fit really well with our beliefs and the philosophy behind the company, and you can add explanations to them, and then that gives people a bit of direction about when they have to make decisions, especially when you're giving people autonomy. People need to know the guiding principles, but when making decisions. And back then those values were quality releasing, and I think the important word is quality. The fact that we're a product data company, and it's all about accuracy and excellence and quality of work. And the other one was quality relationships. We've talked about that a lot in this chat around the genuine human relationships, not just for business sake, but because we're on a planet full of humans, and that's important, and we care about each other. You've got the quick response, which refers to the customer service side of things. So he said if the customer's going to be choosing between two companies that do some work, which ones are they going to go for when they don't necessarily know the quality capabilities of those companies? And it's always going to come down to the service side of things. If they've got good experience with you and they get the response and the communication's great, then they're going to work with you. And the fourth one was quite refreshing. And that was the idea that we were different, and we were different because we weren't following business roadmap. It was we were making it up as we went along, but we were being successful, So and we thought differently. We had a refreshing approach to everything we did, and it was a joie de vivre attitude. And that's changed these days. Well, that last one's changed. So because what we realise is actually this quite refreshing. That actually underpins everything we do, and that's like the headline for the company. And we've got a new fourth one now, which is Curious, spelled QR, IOUS, and that idea that we're people that don't accept the status quo. We want to know more. We want to understand why things work the way they do and how we can improve them. And we use that whenever when we did personal development or performance reviews. We use those as the reference to build that structure, and so people became used to it becoming part of the daily, weekly, monthly runnings operations of the business. And so people began to refer to them, and it'd be funny in some conversations, people would bring up one of the values, and you'd think, wow, people actually kind of get it, or they're actually referring to these things, and they weren't made up. These were distillations of these came from us, and so we lived them. And the people that we hired that became management and leadership figures, we hired them in that image, and so they really believed them and operated in that according to those values. And so I think that's a really powerful factor around culture, the fact that the leadership team are living it and genuinely sticking to it and caring about those things, not just because they're following a manual, but because they are those types of people, and that's the type of people we're recruiting.
This is the point in most interviews where I look at the clock and think there's hours more we could talk about chaps, and I almost to tie off this piece, because I think there's been tons in there around the different aspects, and I'm conscious. I think Adam, I said I'd come back to the 5, and I might do it. It might be a quick one, so I'm gonna throw it out there, and if it's a quick answer, you can tell me. Is you talked about sort of those 5 different pillars, and I really like, by the way, the compass analogy as well, because I think too often in consulting it can seem like a very linear approach, which creates those glass ceilings. And I love the metaphor of actually you can go in your own direction, and it helps you and helps the company. But was there a 6th or 7th that you threw out, and if so, why? How did you settle on 5?
I don't think we have thrown anything out now, so it could be a quick answer. I think probably what we've done is compromised, and where something doesn't quite fit neatly to the model, we just kind of make it fit. So that's the nice thing when you're making things up yourself. You don't need you can rewrite the rules. And it's a blueprint, and then you come up with a blueprint, and then people pick that up and they go and make it reality, and then hundreds of times people come to something that we never thought about and say, well, how does this work? And then they find a way to make it work.
So I liken it to, that we were coming up to this next 5 years, and Blom goes off up the mountain, and after a period of time he comes back down carrying these tablets, which are his vision for the 5 pillars. And he kind of presents it, and there's this moment of enlightenment, and everyone gets it, and it's like, wow, this is brilliant. This is the thing that's going to get us through the next 5 years. And then then the kind of we go away, and then the questions start to pop up, and then it's like, oh yeah, but okay, how are we going to do that? And someone else has understood it a bit differently, and then the real work comes to then actually implement that and make that part of the day-to-day life. And at that point, Adam says, well, I've created the vision, go away and make it happen.
I'm imagining a tapestry or a stained glass window in the office. So I'm conscious we've got to the growing part of quick release, and as much as I say these interviews jump around, I do tend to like a story and a bit like a film. And I guess the interesting part of your journey that we mentioned a bit earlier is actually that you sold the business last year, and still heavily involved, still growing the business. And I guess really interested to dig into that and almost understand how that came in. Was that part of one of these 5-year plans where Adam came down with his stone tablets and on one of them said sell the business? Where did that come from, and almost where does that sort of lead you into that next chapter as well?
So I think it came in through, like most things in quick release, it came in through Rob. So a relationship that he made. Once that relationship had brought the sort of the opportunity for the sale to the table, I think the decision to do it was a couple of things. One thing, being brutally honest, it was really nice to take some risk personally, it's kind of off the table, and some of that value, and turn it into cash in our bank accounts, especially at a time where we're all in our early 40s and still got stuff that we wanted to do with money, and got young children and families that we're sort of trying to raise. So it was nice to have that the money and realize some of that value at this point in our lives. So that's, I think, being brutally honest, that's one reason. But the other reason is, and it sort of comes to the question of why didn't we just take in some VC investment? It wasn't really a cash decision. The business has always been funded through cash that the business has generated, so we've never brought in debt and never needed to brought in debt. And you could argue that maybe we should have grown the business faster if we had debt, but we never felt like it was the cash holding us back. So we didn't need to unlock a chunk of investment in that sense to unlock the next chapter of growth. But what was appealing was Alten were a French global multinational engineering services business, and their list of their top 20 clients was our wet dream for in terms of a new accounts that we wanted to open. And so we'd, in the years running up to the deal, we'd articulated this vision that we wanted to become number one, the most globally recognized consultancy in the specialist niche that we do. And we saw this as just a way to get to that global domination dream much faster, and and with some assistance. So it was a reward for the work done, and then an acceleration of the dream that we saw in the deal.
Yeah, and that framing when we because it's the company's so precious to us, and we love what we do, and we love the people in the business, and that's what makes it so nice to be there, because it's it's one of the things where you genuinely enjoy coming into work every day because of the people and the over and above any of the commercial side of things. And so when we had this approach, when it very quickly became framed as an investment to take the company further, and to help us achieve the vision and our mission quicker and faster and bigger than we thought we could do, that became really exciting. And Adam said, it's great to bank some of the hard work that you've been putting in over the years, but then that idea that the company was going to go beyond anything that we could have achieved solely by ourselves was then the thing that got everyone on board and got everyone excited, and they then wanted that. And we talked because for us the reward from the company is the cash aside, it's that everyday fellowship and friendship. Then the pieces of paper with the share ownership on it and owning a company and any perceived prestige that came with that was irrelevant. It was perfect. So we got to have this opportunity to fulfill our dreams around creating the world's best loved PDM consultancy, and still, be steering the ship and be working with the people that we all think are super cool. And then so it very quickly for us became a no-brainer.
Some really powerful stuff in there, and it's interesting to hear that way it aligned with the business goals and obviously your personal goals with that. And how did it come about? Was it was as part of your vision, like you say, for world domination, Adam, we need that partner? Was it that they just happened to knock on the door and fortune favors the bold? What was?
There's two things I'd say to this. One of them is that we've sometimes been naive in the sense that we this wasn't the first approach, but we were quite naive about the idea of selling the company. I don't know if Adam had it on his roadmap, but I'd never thought that we would sell the company. It was just kind of growing the company and continuing to be a great place to be. And I think if we were going to do things again, I think there are a few roadmaps that you can follow, and that will help you, and you could be more prepared for the growth phases, etc. And secondly, Adam mentioned it earlier on, it's about being open to opportunities. So whether that's someone saying, do you think you could have a crack at this, and saying, yeah, we'll have a go, or you're meeting someone that does something interesting and saying, have you ever thought of joining a company like ours? It's just being open to opportunities and saying yes to things, and more often than not, that will take you in a positive direction.
Yeah, and we will wrap up shortly with your career advice, and I think there's some really powerful points in there. It's funny. I think I mentioned this on podcast before. When I was 17, I had a badminton coach who was much wiser than his years, but I always remember one of the things he said was that sort of you make your own luck, and actually looking out for those opportunities and finding them when they come is a really powerful piece. And I'm interested then, just to round us off, what does that next phase hold? Now you're part of the sort of Altering group. What is the plan for the next few years? What does that hold for Quick Release, and how close are you to world domination?
I think this is where it gets quite interesting. I think we're not close to world domination, and it's become obvious that just having access to potentially a load of new clients doesn't necessarily guarantee a winning ticket. And I think it's becoming clear to me that we're sort of at another inflection point, and there's some other things that we need to figure out as a business. And one of those, for example, is that we've grown up, especially amongst the leadership, with a real sort of collegiate mentality where we sort of take collective responsibility for a lot of things. Even if we put like names against items, the execution is often very much a collective, and have a sort of a collective accountability that goes with it. And that especially works within our group because there's a real friendship there, and if somebody is failing or struggling, then somebody will always kind of step into their place. But actually, as we're trying to sort of scale the business now and scale it quite rapidly towards this global domination, I think that's holding us back a little bit. And actually figuring out how we get the right people in the right seats with the right lines of accountability and the right incentives is the next kind of big question that's going to, or one of the next big questions that's going to determine our success in this global domination chapter. Another big question is the monetization of our strategy for global domination. Do we get there by doing what we do today, but just doing a lot more of it and being a lot bigger? Or do we reform the business around a much higher value proposition so that we're adding a lot more value to our clients for the work that we do, and winning bigger pieces of work around what we do individually as single pieces of work, and get to that world domination through that route? So there's these sorts of big questions that are sort of starting to open up in front of us that we don't know the answer to, and they're going to very much sort of dictate whether we're ultimately successful in the next few years, I'd say.
Well, I think Adam, you've teed us up perfectly for a round two in a year or 2 years' time, where we can come back and you can give us the frameworks for those questions. I think they're really great questions to leave us on, and I think the thing that's come out throughout this conversation is the structures you've been able to put in place, and the ability to catch the inflection points and build the structures around them that you need to keep the business growing is obviously one of the key things that's led to your success. We've got 3 last questions, and these are ones that I ask every guest. And
just before you go into those questions, I was going to say, in light of what Adam was saying, I think if there's people listening to this podcast and they are the wise, was it squash coaches or
badminton in my case,
badminton coaches, out there that has some good advice for Adam and myself, then please do get in touch. And likewise, if you're a potential customer, and you think you could help us execute our growth strategy for the next 3 years, and also do get in touch with us as well.
Thank you for that, Rob. And I will give you another chance to do that at the end as well. So you've got your chance to pitch later as well. So the last 3 questions, and actually it's 4 questions because the 3 are questions and the 4th is really your chance to say exactly what you just did again. These are ones I ask all my guests, and I'll let you decide whether you have a combined answer, you each have an answer. I'm open to both options. So the first question is one about books. And I realize I should probably broaden this question out to just anything that has had an impact on you. I'll give you the question as I ask it, and you take it where you want. So I'm a big reader of business books and a big believer that you can learn a ton from just reading how others have done it before. And one of the reasons I do this podcast is I learn, and I know my listeners learn so much from my guests, but when it comes to books or other resources, what is it that has had the biggest impact on you, or you find yourselves giving or recommending to others most often?
This is a point where Adam probably complains about the amount of articles that I send him and the rest of the team, because there's one of my parts of the business is the organisation part of the business, and therefore I'm very interested in personal development and how people work. So that's always really interesting, and I think every book you read, every article you read starts adds to that puzzle of how we work. So I don't have a specific recommendation, but it's that kind of genre of education and all the new exciting thoughts that come out as well, and especially opinions about feedback and how to do it, and that's the thing that gets me excited, and I think there's a lot that you can learn there around that subject that is quite often taken for granted.
It's not a business book. I would go for Rich Dad Poor Dad as the book that's kind of influenced me most personally. It's really stuck with me through most of my adult life. And also Play Dungeons and Dragons, stuff that takes you into your imagination can have a surprising positive impact on your life in the future.
We always joke that Quick Release is an extension of one of Blum's imaginary worlds, and kind of these civilization growths that he was doing back then as a small boy. He's now we're one of his experiments.
I love it, chaps. And for both Rob, I think that genre of personal development, I'm a massive believer as well. I think finally it's coming to its own. I think even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, people sort of looked down a bit on it was called self-help, and I'm massively with you. I think what you can learn and the knowledge out there in that personal development space is huge. And Adam, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is a fascinating book, and if we had longer, we could talk all about what and why. I love the imagination thing, and actually it's something I'm probably guilty of myself. And I always say these things because I know my wife, she doesn't listen that often, but if she ever does listen, she'll tell me off for not. And it's just, I probably am guilty of not spending enough time doing like just taking time to spend time in your imagination, play those sort of games, just, I guess, focus on something that isn't work, because it's when you're not looking straight at the problem is when you can have some of those best ideas. And then so the final question for both of you, and again, this is take it how you want, but it's very much a recap, which is you have 3 people in front of you. One of them is just starting their career in consulting. So take one of your graduates, for instance. One of them is 4 to 5 years in. So they're far enough down the road that they know what's going on. They may be starting to look at where they sort of steer their career. And then the final person is somebody who is usually in terms of approaching partner, but it might be someone like yourselves sort of when you were 30, that sort of age where you're either going to take an equity position in a consulting business or maybe go out on your own. And the simple question is what one piece of advice would you give to each of them?
Certainly, the person starting out, my advice is, don't ask for things like promotion. Ask for opportunities. Ask for experiences. And there's a lot to learn at the beginning. And there's, if you're one of the good ones, then that will become apparent. And those promotion opportunities and opportunities to progress, they'll come to you, and you'll be thanked for that approach.
I think my advice to somebody starting out is going to be quite similar to that. I like the iceberg model. So if you're starting out and there's somebody that you look up to as a role model and you want to emulate, the 1/8 of their combined things that made them successful is the bit that you see and the visible portion of what they're great at. But actually, it's the stuff that you don't see that is what got them to that place. So it's thinking about the 7/8 that support that 1/8 of visible success, and then how you're going to grow your own personal iceberg that I would focus on.
And for those people at mid-career, then I would be looking at, well, I'd suggest that they look at where can they add value to the business, where can they take the business in their own unique way that is a value add for the company, so that you're not looking to be carried. If you can come up with that new thing, that innovation, or that ownership, the company will back you, and you'll get the opportunity then to kind of have your small empire, whatever it is, and you'll get all the benefits you need from that, but you'll be bringing them to the business. So that's my advice.
I struggle with the 4 to 5 years question because I guess I never really experienced it. I had lots of stuff sort of starting out, and then I, albeit on a smaller scale, was in a partnership kind of position, albeit in an organization that itself was growing. So if I look at our organization now, the people that come through the business now are not necessarily the same as the people who came through the business when it was smaller. And I don't know what is right or wrong, but there's definitely a clear difference. And finding people with an entrepreneurial mindset who can make their way to the top of a larger business on a single career path is quite difficult. And we found it easier to find the entrepreneurial mindset people when we were much smaller. So yeah, I don't know what the answer to it is, but I guess it's part of it is evaluating where you see yourself. Do you see yourself as somebody who is going to be an important cog in a larger organization, or do you see yourself as starting your own consultancy business? And having that sense, I think, would dictate the sorts of things that you're going to try and do at that period.
Great. And for the final one,
it's got to be more than the sum of its parts. So whatever thing that you end up taking ownership of has got to be incremental to everybody's value. Otherwise, you're dead man's shoes. Otherwise, you're simply waiting to replace somebody else who's done something. Whereas if you can bring a new element to a business or a partnership, or a new angle, or deliver some value or an element of a service offering that is new to that particular organization, so that you're creating value for everyone. That's what I would look for these days in a prospective new partner.
My advice to those people that are thinking about, going out there and starting something themselves, and that's don't spend too much time on the theory or the paperwork or creating PowerPoint presentations. You really, as quickly as possible, got to get out there in front of people, getting your product out there and having conversations and making it real as quickly as possible, because you'll have plenty of time to tune it and change the messaging and work out what the commercials look like. But if you kind of sit in a room thinking about it too much, then you're going to miss what's going on, and you struggle to connect.
Well, I think that is a great place for us to leave tonight, chaps. I'm conscious it's late for us, and probably even later for you, Rob. My time difference isn't great. You're an hour ahead of us.
My last meeting yesterday was at midnight, so that I could be online for the Australia and North America at the same time. So this is an early finish for me.
It's comparatively early. Well, I'm glad I could give you that. And so the last
He started at 8
question.
p.m. though. He doesn't mention that bit.
Well, so the last question, and I think you preempted it a little earlier, Rob, but it's for anyone who wants to find out more about yourselves or find out more about Quick Release, where would you point them to? Where can they get in touch?
So yeah, the obvious place is look us up on the website. So Google Quick Release and you'll find us. Adam Blomerley and myself are on LinkedIn. So yeah, do get in touch. We love hearing from people and being connected to people. Yeah, especially if you're running a business and kind of you've got data and information problems that are giving you stress, then we'd love to hear from you because we like making people happy and getting rid of their stress problems.
Brilliant. Well, I think on that note, chaps, we will call it a day. So all that's left to say is thank you very much and all the best for the rest of your week.
You too. Thanks, Nick.
Nick, thank you very much. It's been a great experience and lovely talking to you.
Cheers, chaps. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Climb in Consulting podcast. If you did, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast platform of choice, whichever one you may be using. And please also share this with anyone that you think could benefit from hearing today's interview. If you want to get in touch or give me any feedback about the podcast, please feel free to drop me an email. It's nick@climbinconsulting.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.